All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. Let's thank our sponsors for this morning. TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat. Mrs. Bracha Strimber, in memory of her husband Avi Strimber, Avraham ben Kehilla and Aliyas Neshoma. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the Neshoma will have an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. To thank Avi Tobias for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Drashos this month in honor of the Shir and the Ribono Shel Olam's incredible Torah. To thank our Day of Learning sponsor, Mrs. Pearl Katz, in honor of the Shir, in honor of the Kehilla, and as in Zchus for the Aliyas Neshoma for Zev ben Yosef Zichron Livracha. Incredible. Actually, Mrs. Katz's father, who was deaf all of his life and couldn't learn, but lived life to its fullest. Truly beautiful. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the Neshoma will have an Aliyah and a family a Nechama. With that, let us begin. So today's daf is daf Hey. We actually have a very beautiful daf ahead of us today. We are picking up on Dalid Amud Beis 4b. We left off at the two das. Not the second last two das. It's 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. Umitaknin es hamekukalos. So also remember again, the Mishnah said that you can go ahead and fix bipashtos. What this sounds like is if you have a channel of water, that got messed up, right? Let's say again, debris fell into it, so you can go ahead and fix the channel of water. So it says the Gemara, what does that mean? Rabbi Abba, Shimhaisa amuka tefach. What it means is that, so I was going to say, if you take a look at Rashi says, Shem haisa muka tefach, kilomar, shalat chatchila hayasham amos hamayim bashisha tefachim. So we'll say it appears that in general, when creating a channel of water, so the optimal depth would be 6 tefachim. So let's say, right, so you have a channel that's 6 tefachim deep. Let's say now debris fell into the channel to the point that now the channel is only 1 tefach deep. So you have 5 tefachim worth of debris. So the Gemara says, what does it mean? So Rabbi Abba says, Shem haisa muka tefach, ma'amida shisha tefachim. So Rabbi says, when the Mishnah says that mitaknin esam mekukeles, that means that if it was originally 6 tefachim and now debris fell into it and now there's only 1 tefach of open area, you can dig out 5 tefachim of space from the channel. So the Gemara says, Pshita, chatzi tefach al shlosha tefachim. So it goes without saying that Allah says, if you have a channel, and now let's say it's only a half a tefach of open space, and you want to dig out 3 tefachim, kevan de lo avar maya lo klumhu, so we'll say, so obviously not allowed to do that on Chalamayid. Why can't you do that on Chalamayid? Because we'll say digging out a channel to a depth of 3 tefachim does what? Nothing. And therefore, ultimately, again, it's just going to be unnecessary tircha. Tfachayim al shnei masar, to go from a channel that's 2 tefachim and dig it out to a depth of 12 tefachim, the katarach tircha yisera lo. Ultimately, we'll say that's going to be too much effort, right? Because you don't need a channel that's 12 tefachim deep. Listen to this case. Tfachayim al shiva mahu. And we'll say, what happens if you have a channel that's 2 tefachim deep, and now you want to dig it to a depth of 7 tefachim? Then I will say, now what's the shayla? Listen to this. Now remember, we just said before, what's the ideal depth for a channel? What's the ideal depth? 6 tefachim. So now you have 2 tefachim of open space, you want to dig out to 7. So is that permitted? Hacha chamisha kamamik, vacha chamisha kamamik. On one hand, what did we say before? I will say, remember again, the Mishnah the Gemara opened up with the case of where you had an original 6 tefach channel that then accumulated 5 tefachim of debris. So what did the Mishnah say? You're allowed to dig it out. So you could dig out 5 tefachim. So we'll say, so do we say that just like in that case you could dig out 5 tefachim, so too if there's 2 tefachim of open space, you can go ahead and dig out another 5, make a channel of 6 tefachim of depth. O Dilma, or do we say, no. 5 is not a magic number, it's just getting to 6 is permitted. But once you're digging to 7, that's considered to be an extra tefach of tircha yisir, and therefore it's prohibited, teku. To which the Gemara leaves this as an open question. Okay, so I'll say, so what we know with absolute certainty is that if you had a channel that already existed, and then it got filled in with debris, you are allowed to dig out that channel to a depth of 6 tefachim. That's what we know. Anything more than that, meaning if you were to go ahead and have two tefachim of open space, and now want to dig it out to 7, that's going to be a shaila. Good. Abai says some interesting cases. So Abai shara libnei bar hamdach l'shachufei nara. So Abai permitted the people of bar hamdach. What's the in shachufei nara? Rashi says, second to last line in Rashi, la kor anfei ilanos hagedilim benar. He allowed them to go ahead and remove branches which were growing into the river. Rabbi Yirmiyah Shar, and they were obviously all these cases we're going to see are blocking water sources. That's what's happening over here. So he allowed them to go in and clear out debris to go ahead and get branches out of the river source. So the Rabbi Yirmiyah Sharilei Lebnei Sakusa Lemichra Nara Timima. So Rabbi Yirmiyah allowed the people of Bnei Sakusa, rather than Lemichra Nara Timima, Rashi says, so the Fanos Mekara Mayashinistam, to clear out the spring that had become blocked up. Rav Ashi Shari Lahu Lebnei Masa Machasya La'akduche Nar Burnitz. Rav Ashi allowed the people of Masa Machasya La'akduche, Rashi says, Lefanos Sirton Shebe'em Sanar, a sandbank had accumulated in the middle of the river. He permitted them to dredge the river to allow the water to flow. So the Gemara says, why is that? Amar Kevan Deshasumini Rabim Kirabim Dami. Because we're saying all of these cases, these were situations where the water source served the needs of the public. And what do we learn in the Mishnah? Tanan Osin Kol Tzarchei Rabim. And about what do we learn in the Mishnah? In the Mishnah we saw that anything that is necessary for public needs, one is permitted to do. So Rabbi say, these are all just examples again of dredging up, or I should say, unblocking water sources, which will all be permitted. Good. Let's go back to it. So we'll say top of hay. What else are you allowed to do? You're permitted to go ahead, right? You're permitted to go ahead and clear out public water cisterns, right? That again, all of these cases are where these sources of water are getting blocked up. So one is permitted to go ahead and clear it out on Chalamayid. So the Gemara says, interestingly enough, so the Lashon is very specific. The Lashon over here is mitaknin kilkuli hamayim, which tells me that if I have a water cistern, right, the water cistern, which serves the needs of the public, and then what happens? That water source gets blocked up, I am permitted to go ahead and unblock that on Chalamayid. So the Gemara makes an interesting deal. Chatita in, chafira lo. What are you allowed to do, Rabbosai? You could clear it out. What can't you do? Dig a new one. So in other words, on Chalamayid, I could take a water source that already exists, that got blocked up, that serves the needs of the public, and I could unclog it. But I can't dig something new. When can't you dig a new water source? That's only if the public doesn't need it. But if the public does need the water source, afilu chafira mutar, then even digging a new water source will be permitted. So it's a very interesting halacha. Is that true? That if the rabbin need a water source, you're allowed to dig a new one on Chalamayid? Vatanya, we learn, chotetin boros sichin uma oros shal yachid. You're permitted to clear out boros sichin uma oros, pits, water cisterns, caves, pools, right? These are water sources of an individual. Vein sarach lomar shal rabbin. And Abosai goes without saying that if you could clear out the water sources belonging to an individual, you could of course do so for the rabbim as well. However, vein chofrin boros sichin uma oros shal rabbim, but you cannot go ahead and dig. Dig, Rabosai, means what? To dig something new. To dig a new bar, a new siach, a new ma'ari. You can't dig a new pit, a new water cistern, or a new cave, even for the rabbim. Vein sarach lomar shal yachid. And all the more so, you can't dig a new water source for a yachid. So what's going on over here? My lab b'sharabin strichalahen. Shabbosai, isn't the Gemara saying over here that you cannot dig a new water source for the Chalamayid, for the rabbin, even if the rabbin need it? To which the Gemara says, "Lo b'she'ein rabbin strichalahen." No. What is it talking about? When can't you dig a new water source, Shabbosai, for the rabbin? When it's not necessary. Then I will say, so remember again, what the Gemara is saying is like this: if the rabbim don't need it, You can't dig it. You can't dig it. Dikavose gabe yochid she'ein yochid tzarech lahem. So by the similar case, by a yochid that doesn't need a water source, chatita mishari, then would even clearing it out be permitted? Vatanya, we learned, boros sichin uma'oros shal yochid konsan mayim l'sochan. If you have boros sichin uma'oros, we'll say again, pits, cisterns, caves that belong to an individual. Konsin mayim l'sochan. You could go ahead and gather water into these areas. However, aval lo chotetin, but you cannot go ahead and dig them out. In other words, if they accumulated debris, you cannot clean them out. V'lo shafen es sidkehen, if they became cracked, you cannot go ahead and plaster the cracks. V'shal rabim, however, again, water sources that belong to the public, chotetin osan, you can clear them out of debris. V'shafen es sidkehen, and you could go ahead and smooth out, literally again, close up their cracks. In other words, if it's cracked, you can plaster it. Ve'ela mai shebi yochid tzarech lahem. Now, aren't we talking about over here, in the case where the individual needs it, dikavase gabe rabim kisherab tzuychen lahem, and yet a similar case by the rabbim, where the rabbim needs the water, and what do you see? Right? It appears that chafira will be aser, but chafira be aser, but we're digging a new water source where the rabbim needs it be aser. Vatanya, we learned, boros sichin uma oros shal yachid. If you have boros sichin uma oros that belong to the individual, konsan mayim l'sochan, you could channel water into it. V'chotetin osan, you could clean them out of debris. Avalo shafen es sidkehen, you cannot go ahead and plaster the cracks. V'lo chotetin l'sochan, you cannot go ahead and clear out debris. V'lo sudden osan basid, you cannot go ahead and smooth it out or coat it with plaster. V'shal rabim, but if the water source belongs to the rabbim, chofer and oso, first of all, you could dig it, you could create a new one. B'sadin osa basid, if it's an older one, you could plaster it. Shabbos say, so what's going on over here? Elikashya hach kamaisa. Shabbos say, now we're totally confused, right? We're totally confused. So here, pretty much the only thing I know is that if it belongs to the rabbim and it gets clogged with debris, I can clean it out. That's what I know. What I don't know is anything else. Now, specifically, what we're really focused on over here is as follows. What we're really focused on is, can you dig a new water source for the rabbim? And I will say that shaila has two parts to it. If they need it, and if they don't need it. Is that permitted on Chalamayid? To which the Gemara says, okay, here we go. Taritzachi. We will say, here is the final understanding. Chotetin boros shal yachid. You can clean out debris from the water cisterns, from the water sources belonging to an individual when b'shiyachid tzarech lahem. So I will say halacha lemaisa, and we're going to see this in the Shulchan Aruch in just a moment. Halacha lemaisa. If you have a water source that belongs to an individual, you are permitted to clean that out from debris on Chalamayid, assuming that what? The individual needs it. The ein tzarech lomar bishal rabim, kisher rabim tzichelin. I will say goes without saying that the same halacha applies to a water source which belongs to the rabbim, to the collective, right? To the rabbim, to the public. So I will say that now, meaning what? That if a water source belonging to the rabbim becomes clogged, you could go ahead and clean that out from debris on Chalamayid. Furthermore, da'afilu chafira mutter. Further, because for the rabbim, Rabbi said, you could even dig a new water source if you need to. So if you could dig a new water source, then al achas kama v'kama, all the more. So what? You could clean out debris. Now, 1 second. Then chofrin boros sichin umaros. When can you dig a new water source for the rabbin? Right? I'm sorry. Ve'ein chofrin boros sichin umaros rabbin, but you cannot dig a new water source for the rabbin. B'she'ein rabbim tzrichen lahem, when the public doesn't need it. Ve'ein tzarech lomar shel yachid, and all the more so again for an individual. D'chi ein yachid tzarech lahem, when an individual doesn't need it. Afilu chatita nami aser. Even cleaning it out will be aser. Okay, I will say. Says bring it together with the Gemara just said. It's interesting how I don't know. It's a strange way of phrasing it. It goes from the positive to the negative. I will say, but now we have greater clarity. Let's first start with the yachid and then we'll go to the rabbin. Yachid, can you dig a new water source? Never. Right? No hezbollah to dig a new water source. What can you do? You can unclog an already dug water source, assuming that what? The yachid needs it. Right? If the yachid needs it, you can unclog it. If the yachid doesn't need it, you can't unclog it. Rabbim. So again, you could unclog an already dug water source, right? That's clear. But not only that, you could even dig a new water source for the Rabbim, if what? If they need it. Good. So Rav Ashi says, Mas nisin namideka. The Mishnah seems to support this view as well. Diktani osin kol tzarchei Rabbim. The Mishnah both said a statement. The statement was, you could take care of any of the needs of the Rabbim. So the Gemara, and it doesn't say, it says kol tzarchei. Now both say kol is coming to include something. Kol la'asuye mai. What is kol coming to include? Lav la'asuye chafira. It's coming to include even digging a new water source. That if the Rabbim need a new water source, halacha lamaisa, you can dig that on Chalamayid. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Lo la'asui hadasai, maybe it's going to include something else. Yotzin lekavetz hadrachim, uletakin harachobos, visa it's terachos. So I will say, so again, here the Mishnah talk, the Brisa says as follows. Perhaps when it says that, so I will say, okay, so the Gemara wanted to suggest that the Mishnah supports our position. The Mishnah says that you're permitted to go out on a Chalamai to take care of kol tzarchei Rabbim, all the needs of the public. So the Gemara says, what does kol tzarchei Rabbim mean? It means to include a case where halacha lamaisa, whether the Rabbim needs an already existing water source dug out, cleaned out, you could do that. Or, if it needs a new water source, you could do that as well. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Maybe somebody should come to teach me a different halacha. What's a different halacha? Tisanya, yotzin lekavetz es hadrachim. So what's an interesting case? You can go out on Chalamayid to cut thorns, to cut back thorn bushes on public thoroughfares, right? Dracha on public pathways. Uletakin es harachovos. You can go out on Chalamayid to fix the roads. Ve'es ha'itziravs, to fix the marketplaces. V'lamod es ha'mikvos, and to measure the mikvos, to make sure they have the requisite amount of water. V'chol mikvah shem ba'arba'im sa'ah, in any mikvah that doesn't have the requisite amount of water of 40 sa'ah, what's the halacha? Margilin l'socha arba'im sa'ah. You make sure, you fill it up. U'minayishim lo yatsu v'asu kol elu. And how do you know that if the Beis Din did not send out people to take care of these things, even on Chalamayid, shakal damim shenishpuchu sham ma'ale aleim hakasav kilu shafchum. And how do you know chas shalom if there's any bloodshed? Now both say, now it's interesting, it's a strong lashon. Why would there be bloodshed? Ultimately, again, if they don't trim back the thorns, take care of the roads, or do the mikvos, so both say this is not like bloodshed like somebody dying. As just mentioned, this is like bloodshed literally again from thorns. Right? So in other words, that halacha l'maisa, if somebody walks on the road and gets cut by the thorns, Beis Din is responsible for that, because they are responsible to make sure that the roads are kept up in a normal way. So the Gemara says, Talmud Omar, v'haya alecha damim. Pasuk says, ultimately again, the blood will be on your hands, or will be upon you. To which the Gemara says, so therefore I will say, the Gemara wants to suggest that when the Mishnah says that we take care of kol tzarchei Rabbim, maybe it's coming to include this list of items: cutting back the thorns, making sure the roads are okay, taking care of the mikvos. That's what it means to say. But maybe it's not referring to digging new water cisterns on Chalamayid, to which the Gemara says, no. Habehedya katanila. This list is explicitly mentioned in the Mishnah. Metaknin es hadrachim, ves harachobos, ves hamikvos. So also we explicitly said this in the Mishnah. Beis Din is responsible for making sure that the pathways are cleared out from thorns, that the roads are usable, that the mikvaos are up to code, va'osin kol tzarchei Rabbim. And then it says the phrase, we take care of all of the needs of the Rabbim. To which the Gemara says, what does that come to include? My lav la'asuye chafira. Doesn't that come to include even the digging of new water cisterns? Shmamina. So therefore the Gemara says the phrase of kol tzarchei Rabbim doesn't have to include taking care of the roads and the mikvos, because those are explicitly stated in the Mishnah itself. Therefore, the Mishnah says the phrase that ultimately again we take care of kol tzarchei Rabbim. Kol tzarchei Rabbim must be there to do what? Kol tzarchei Rabbim means that if the public needs a new water cistern, we're permitted to dig that on Chalamayid as well. Sefer Rabosai, and this is indeed how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Shulchan Aruch says this is in Siman Taf Kuf Mem Dalid Sif Beis. So the Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Boros u'ma'ayono sharabim shenafal bahem afar va'avanim minis kalkulu mutlo taknom va'afilu ein rabim tzrichem ata kevan she'ena ma'isurim. Let's listen to this. If you have already existing water cisterns that become plugged up with debris on Chalamayid, you're allowed to clean it out on Chalamayid. Now, look what the Shulchan Aruch says. This is true even if the rabbin doesn't need those particular cisterns. So it's interesting. Let's say there's plenty of other cisterns, right? So I don't need these that are clogged up now. You're still allowed to unclog the water cisterns for the rabbin, right? For the rabbin, you can unclog it even if it's not necessary. Avo, lachpor lahem boros mechadash umaysu uman, but I will say to go ahead and dig new water cisterns, which is specialized malacha, that's permitted only when so I'll say that's only permitted halacha l'maisa if it's needed, right? If it's needed. So I'll say that's halacha l'maisa. You could unclog any water cistern belonging to the rabbin, even if the rabbin doesn't need it right now. But to dig new water cisterns is permitted, provided that the rabbin need it. However, avaboros sichin uma'aros shal yachid. What about individual cisterns? Asr lachpor samechadash. Can never dig new cisterns on Chalamayid, right? Even if you need new cisterns, can't dig new cisterns. However, if you have old cisterns and they become filled with debris, what's the halacha? If you need it, you can clean it out. So we'll say pretty much exactly as we just saw it in the Gemara is how it is codified halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa Shulchan Aruch. Now, interestingly enough, the Gemara. So now remember, for the yachid, if you need the cistern, you can clean it out. If you don't need the cistern, you can't clean it out. Under no circumstances can you dig a new cistern. The Shulchan Aruch does say something very interesting. He says what you can do is, even if you don't need this cistern right now, you could channel additional water into the cistern. That's permitted. Apparently, again, the act of channeling, right, new water into the cistern isn't considered to be such a big deal, and therefore one is permitted to do so even if technically they don't need it. Okay, interesting. But say good. That brings that sugya to a close. So says the Gemara, next piece of the Mishnah was, we mark graves. We can mark graves on Chalamayid. So Rabbi say, let's analyze this. This is really quite fascinating. So Rabbi says, so obviously the yesod of marking graves, the yesod of marking graves is why? So that people should know someone's buried here, that there's a source of tumah, and that people should be careful. So it says something very interesting. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, remez l'tzion kvaras min haTorah minayim. We'll say, from where do we know that we're supposed to mark graves? Like, where is there a remez? Where is there a scriptural allusion to the concept of marking graves? Says the Gemara, Tzatama Lomar, V'ra'ah, Etzem Adam, Ubana Etzlo Tzion. Shabbos says to the Gemara, very quotes from the Pasuk. Quotes from the Pasuk from Yecheskel, right? And the Pasuk says something very interesting. The Pasuk says, you will see the bone of a person, and you will build a Tzion. You will build a monument by it. So here the Navi says, when you see a bone, when you see human remains, you should build some type of if you look at Rashi, by the way, the Chsivra at Sim Shabbos is actually quite fascinating. So first of all, take a look at the previous Rashi. Mitzayin es hakvaros, she'osin simanim al hakvaros besid. Also, what they would often do is they would paint the area over a grave with plaster. Their plaster was very white, like luminescently white, right? And therefore that would serve as a marker, as we tell people that there's someone buried and they should be careful. So interesting enough, Tichsev V'ra Etzem Yecheskel Misnabe Ala Osid Shlavo Shiyasu Yisrael Tziyunim Ala Zavos HaBaram. So let's listen to this. This pasuk in Yecheskel is a reference to the war of Gog and Magog, right? The ultimate war between good and evil before the arrival of Mashiach. And the Nabi here is describing that Eretz Yisrael is going to be littered with corpses. And as a result, Yecheskel says, wherever you see human remains, make sure to mark it. Make sure to mark it. Amrli Rabbi Ravashi. Hami kamei delesi Yecheskel man amar. So listen to this. Rabbi says, Rabbi Ravashi, okay. And before Yecheskel, how did we know to do this? Well, as Rabbi say, there's a significant amount of Jewish history right before Yecheskel as well. So how did we know about the concept of creating a tzion, right? Some type of marker on top of graves before Yecheskel. To which the Gemara says, "Ulatamech hadam Rav Chisda davar zemitoros Moshe Rabbeinu lo lamadnu midivri Yecheskel ben Buzi lamadnu." Yet Rav Chisda said as follows: there's another halacha that we didn't learn from the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Instead, we learned it from the Torah of Yecheskel. What did Yecheskel teach us? Kol ben nechar orel leiva orel basar lo yavel al mikdashi l'sharseni. The pasuk says that a Kohen who is not circumcised, right, a Kohen who doesn't have a bris milah, cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have Yecheskel. So tell me, Mikamei Dalesi Yecheskel Man Amar. So we'll say before Yecheskel came along, it's not like Yecheskel introduced this new halacha that an uncircumcised Kohen can't do the avodah. Before Yecheskel, how did we know it? To which the Gemara says, Ella Gemara Gemirila, Va'asi Yecheskel Vasmacha Akra. I will say these were halachas, right? Halachas l'Moshe Misinai. Halachas l'Moshe Misinai. Yecheskel just came along and stated it explicitly in a pasuk. But for example, we had halacha l'Moshe Misinai that a Kohen who was uncircumcised is unable to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Yecheskel said it. Same idea. Hachanami Gemara Gamirla Va'as Yecheskel Va'asmacha Akra. Well, it's the same idea. We always had a tradition. We always had halacha l'Moshe Misinai that what? That you have to put some type of marker on top of a grave. Yecheskel was just the one who did what? He came along and he said it in a pasuk. But we always knew it. We always knew it. So therefore, again, the first of our Hashem and Pazi says, again, it's really going to be a beautiful Gemara ahead of us now. Hashem and Pazi says that halacha l'maisa, we're just trying to figure out what's the makar. What's the source for placing a marker on top of a grave? So the first approach is Yecheskel. But it turns out it's not really Yecheskel. What is it? It's a tradition already from Moshe Rabbeinu, but ultimately Yecheskel was the first one who explicitly articulated it. Good. Rabbi Avo says from a different place. V'tamei yikra. So what is incredible? Where is this from? Tamei yikra. This is by the Mitzorah. Person has saras. So the pasuk says, right, Vatsara Shebo Hanega Begod of Yeperumim, he has to tear his clothing, Varosh Yeparo, he has to allow his hair to grow, right, Va'alsafam Yata V'Tamei Yikra. He calls out Tamei. So what does that mean? We'll say, Tuma Kora Lo Va'omeres Lo Parosh. We'll say, now why does the Mitzorah say Tamei? So that people stay away from him. So what do you see from here? You see from that whenever you have something that is Tamei, you have an obligation to call out, so to speak, to the general public and warn them to stay away. And therefore, I will say again, same idea. We place the marker over the grave. That's the way we tell the general public to stay. I will say, I just want to point out, remember, the issue over here that we're concerned about, I will say, is what? Somebody carrying truma. Right? I will say, so imagine, you're just a nice Kohen minding your own business, carrying your truma. You stumble upon a grave, now you're tamei, and you've made truma tameya. What do you do with truma tameya? You burn it. But we don't want to do that. So we'll say, so again, that's really, in other words, if I'm just a regular Yisrael, right? I'm just a regular Yisrael, and I become tamei, the stakes really aren't all that high. It's fine. I mean, I have to become tar, and before I go to the Beis HaMikdash, but it's not a big deal. This really has ramifications much more for Kohanim. That's why I care for. Because Rabbi Avo says the same way that the Mitzorah has an obligation to say Tamei that people stay away, we have an obligation to make the general public stay away from sources of Tumah. Therefore, we mark the grave. Rabbi Uziel, Braid Rabbi Uziel Rabba, Tumah Korilo Va'omeres Parosh. So the Gemara says, but if V'haila Yudasa, is that what this pasuk comes to teach us? Or was it's incredible? So Ahumi Baili, no. The Tamei Yikra comes to teach me something else. Comes to teach me Lechidisanya. The Tamei Yikra. Rabbi, so what does it mean that the Mitzorah calls out Tamei? Sarech lahodia tsara l'rabim. Rabbi say, when a person is suffering, it is important that he make his suffering known to other individuals. V'rabim mevakshim alav rachamim. So that other people can daven for him. They will say, this is a very interesting concept that very often, many of us may be very private people, right? And there's a certain sense of privacy when you're going through something, you do not want to telegraph that out to the general public. But yet there's this idea that if other people know about what it is that I'm struggling with, they can daven for me. And that ability for other people to daven for me is such a powerful thing. So there's this incredible tension. On one hand, very often a natural desire for privacy, but on the other hand, a need to share it, at least in some way. We'll say, not to share for the sake of sharing, but to share for the sake that other people could mamish daven for me. And if I have those other tefillos working on my behalf, there's no telling what that could do for me. So the Gemara says, that's what Tamei Yikra teaches me. Im kain lichtov v'tamei Yikra. If that's the case, and if that's all it was teaching me was that I should tell other people about myself and say, daven for me, it just could have said v'tamei. Now the Gemara says, my v'tamei tamei, shamas mina tarti. Let's listen to this. It could have just said v'tamei Yikra. The fact that it says v'tamei Yikra teaches me what? Both lessons. Lesson number one, that the Mesorah has to warn people that he's tamei, therefore they will stay away. And from there we learn that we have to warn the general public about sources of tumah. And halacha number 2, it teaches me that when a person is undergoing difficult times, share it. Share it with others. You don't have to broadcast it to the world, but share it with others so that at least some others have the ability to daven on your behalf. Beautiful. Abai says, we learned this halacha from a different source. Abai says, do you know why you have to go ahead and mark graves? Don't place a stumbling block in front of the general public, right? We'll say, in other words, if you don't mark the grave, then what's going to happen? A person is literally going to stumble across it. They're going to become tamei. If they're holding other consecrated or consecrated items, those items will become tamei as well, and that's problematic. Good. So the Gemara says, Rav Papa Amar, Va'amar, Solu, Panu Derech. Clear away, make room in the derech, make room on the road. So pave the way, make room on the road. So it's the same idea. They're just bringing different psukim that seem to highlight this idea, right? So pave the way, clear the road from any obstacles. So the Gemara says, Rav Chinina Amar, Harimu Michshol Miderech Ami. It means remove any obstacles from the pathway of my people. Rabbi Yoshobred, Rav Idi Amar, says it's beautiful. You will show the people, or you will make known to the people the derech, that they should walk on it. Okay? So we'll say, again, everybody's agreeing. The idea is that you have to go ahead and mark the grave so that people know where the tumah is. They're just all learning it from different sources. You shall make the people vigilant about their tumah. Rav Ashi Amar, Ushmartem es mishmarti, asu mishmeres lemishmarti. Right? Literally, again, you will guard my watches, make a mishmeres. Go ahead and be vigilant over mishmarti. Ravina both said this is a magnificent drasha. Ravina says, both say now Ravina is quoting the pasuk. Ravina is quoting the pasuk. We read to the pasuk in its entirety. Gemara is quoting from Tehillim, Zoveach Todi Chabdinani, he who offers a toda, a carbon toda, right, will give me honor. V'sam derech arena b'yesha elokim. And I will say v'sam derech, which literally means he who places a road, arena b'yesha elokim. I will allow him to see the salvation of God. And I both say, now watch this. Now just to understand, before we get into the beautiful drasha, the reason the Gemara is bringing this up is why? Because the Gemara is darshaning, v'sam derech, he who makes a clear road. So again, once again, the Gemara says, what does it mean to make a clear road? What does it mean to make a clear road? How do you make a clear road? Mark graves. Mark graves. That way people know where they can walk and where they can't walk. But I both say, watch this drasha. Amir Shobin Levi, Kal Hasam, or really Kal Hasham, Archosav, zoche v'Rabbi Yeshua Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I will say, whoever measures his pathways, or weighs his pathways, really means, Shama will say, is lashon of Shuma, evaluate. Right? Whoever weighs his different pathways in life will be privileged to go ahead and see the salvation of God. Shnei Amar, v'sam derech, al tikri v'sam, ella v'sham. Don't read it as v'sam derech, place a path, rather read it as v'sham, weigh the path. Weigh the path. Person who weighs his path will see the salvation of God. Now, say, what does it mean to weigh your path? Rabbi say, take a look at Rashi. This is incredible. Rashi says, V'sham derech she'osin simfar. Arena b'yesh Elokim zeh hasham archosav. Rabbi say, this refers to a person who weighs his path. Right? Not weighs, W-A-Z-E. Right? Weighs, right? Weighs the path. Right? Literally weighs which derech to take, Rabbi say. Listen to this. Hamachashet hefsed mitzvah kineged schara uschar avera kineged hefseda. Rabbi says absolutely beautiful. Sham derech, Rabbi says means so the pasuk is some derech, place a path. The drush of the Gemara is sham derech, weigh your path. Weigh your path. Rabbi say, what does it mean to weigh your path in life? He'll say the Gemara is saying, you know what the secret to successful living is? One phrase: cost-benefit analysis. See, Rabbi is saying everything in life has a cost-benefit analysis, because every single decision I make has a cost and has a benefit, and life is all about weighing the cost and the benefit. So a person chooses to do a mitzvah. Rabbi said, let's be honest. When you do a mitzvah, there's often a cost, right? What's the cost? Well, there could be literally a financial cost. There's a time cost. There's a resources cost. There's a tircha cost. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But there's also a benefit. A person commits an aveira. There's ridiculous benefit with averas. Well, so let's be honest. You know, it's too early and too icy to not be honest, right? Now, let's say there's so much great benefit with averas. Averas are great. Let's be honest, right? Averas are so wonderful. They're so enjoyable. They're so fantastic. They give me so much hana, so much pleasure. There's a lot of benefit in the world of sin. There's also an incredible amount of cost. So Rabbi see, too often in life, what we do is, when we engage in activity, we only look at one side of the analysis. We only look at either the benefit or the cost. Rarely do we look at both. And the truth is, informed living requires me to do a complete cost-benefit analysis. Rabbi say, can you imagine if we actually lived it this way? If before I did something, I ran the numbers, right? I did the analysis. Yeah, the Aveira is Geshmak. It's great. It's so fantastic. It's so pleasurable. It's so delicious. It's so wonderful. But at the end of the day, as much benefit as it provides me, there's so much sunk cost, right? There's so much that I lose. I benefit, but I lose so much more. The mitzvah, it's so difficult. It's so exhausting. It's so overwhelming. It's so onerous. It's true. It might be true on all of those accounts. But look how much I benefit. Says the Gemara, something amazing. That V'sham derech, he who lives life with the shuma, with a constant evaluation of his decisions. He who lives life with a constant evaluation and weighing of the pathway he's going to take. I will say, what's the result of such a lifestyle? Arena b'yesha Elokim. We'll see the salvation of God. Rabbi say, it doesn't mean life is going to be easy when you do the cost-benefit analysis. What it does mean is that you're going to live a type of salvational life because you are engaged in the process of proper decision-making. Rabbi say, our greatest problem in life is not sin. Our greatest problem in life is that we don't think enough before we act. That we don't engage in proper evaluative decision-making, that I don't think things through to their proper conclusion, that I live based on impulse, I live based on desire, and I don't think the entire analysis through. Hashamar Chosav, if I would only be thought out enough to really weigh everything, Arena B'yesh Elokim, you will see the salvation of God. I will say an entire Shas is worth it for this Gemara. This is the secret. Everyone wants to know the secret, right? Barnes & Noble, right? Amazon filled with shelves and shelves of books about how to get happy in life, how to be successful in life. It could save you thousands of dollars. Moed Katan, Hey Amud Aleph, 5 lines up from the bottom. This is it, Rabbi Say. This is the secret to successful living. But finding the secret is not the hard part. Implementing it is the challenge. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, 3 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara says, Al tikri v'sham ela v'sham. Good. Rabbi Yanai havalei hahu talmida. This is what Gemara tells a story. Rabbi Huda had a Talmud. The kol yom havi makshile. We'll say this Talmud in Shir always was the guy who always asked the questions, right? Always asked the questions. We snuffed that out a long time ago, right? We'll say, Baruch Hashem, that check, done with that. We'll say, so right, there was that Talmud. He davens elsewhere now. Right? So we'll say, so there was that Talmud, right? To always ask the questions, every single shir, listen to this. B'Shabbos B'Regel Lo Havim Akshilei. But on Shabbos of the Regel, right, so we'll say during the Regalim, Shabbos of the Regalim, so they used to have large shiurim. This Talmud did not ask. He didn't ask his questions. So Amud Beis, so Rabbi Yana said about this guy, Karilei, Bisham or Bisam Derech Arena Beyesh Elokim. So Rabbi Yana complimented him. He said, you know what? He's a nudnik all of the time, but at least he knows when not to ask the questions, right? When there's a large public shir, he was smart enough to know now is not the time to ask. Incredible. Tan Rabbanon, in mitzayin lo kizayis melameis v'lo etzem kisor v'lo davar she'ino mitami ba'oel. So let's listen to this. Now, we'll say, so now we've established all of these different sources, right, for the concept, for the rule of going ahead and placing a marker over a grave. Right? So now we've done that. So we'll say, so now based on this, the Gemara says, now, but what do you have to make a marker on? So the Gemara says, you don't have to make a marker on a kizayis from a corpse, or not on a bone that is the size of a barley fragment, right, of a grain fragment. Nor on any piece of a corpse that's not mitame ba'ohel. Remember again, tumas ohel means when something that you're under the same roof with has the ability to convey tumas meis. Avamitzainin ala shidra. But I will say if there's an intact spinal column, you have to go ahead and make a marker over that. Va'ala gulgoles, or on a skull. Va'al rov binyan, va'al rov minyan hames. Or I will say if you have the majority of the skeleton intact, or even if you have the majority of the skeleton, but the majority of the bones, you have to go ahead and make a marker on that. Vein mitzainin alavados. Let's listen to this. It's actually very interesting. You do not have to go ahead and make a marker on a grave that everyone knows about. Look at Rashi. In mitzainin alavados, hoil debar lekuli amad the is beitum of ados lo matal to osakol taz. What's this very interesting halacha? If everyone knows that there's a grave, everyone knows. Even if there's no particular marker there, there's no obligation to mark the site. Rabbi said, remember again, marking the site only becomes obligatory when there's a concern that people don't know. But if everyone knows, no obligation for a marker. But Rabbi said, you do have to make a marker on a suffix, right? On a situation where we're not sure. So the Gemara says, here are situations of sveikos. Sichos. So also we're going to see these are areas where there is a tree canopy. Now let's remember again, having a potential grave under a tree canopy is dangerous. Why? Because the canopy serves as what? As ohel, which then disperses the tumah everywhere under the canopy. So remember again, which would mean, normally let's say you have an open grave. So the halach is you're not really supposed to be within dalet amos of a grave. But as long as you're outside of dalet amos, that's fine. But if the grave is under a tree canopy, right, and let's say that canopy spans 50 amos, anywhere under that canopy, you become tameh. So upros, so I'll say pros we're going to see are also pieces of a stone wall where you have stones which protrude. So those protrusions can also serve as an ohel or beis sapras. So also we've seen beis sapras a number of times throughout our journey in Shas. Beis sapras is a field in which there was a grave, but the grave was plowed over. Now the concern of Osai is what? That there are bone fragments everywhere in the field. Okay, so let's analyze. Vein ma'amidin tziyun b'makom tuma sholahavsid es hataras. So listen to this case. We do not go ahead and make a tziyun in a makom tuma in order not to go ahead and be mafsid taras. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Vein ma'amidin tziyun ala tuma sholahavsid taros shima tuma mamish tachas hatziyun eno magish at shebala tziyun pitom. The tamu ataras shariatuma tachas hatziyun ala ozin hatziyun samach l'tuma b'rachush. It's very interesting. So listen to this. When you make a marker over a grave, Rabbi, the Gemara says you don't make the marker only directly over the tumah, but rather what you do is you make the marker, you extend it a little bit in the surrounding area as well. Why? What's the concern? So I was saying, people are often not cognizant of things until when? Until they're right on top of it. The problem is if the marker is too exact, then by the time the person realizes that they're by a marker, they're already on top of the marker, or right by the marker. And if the marker mamish is right, because remember again, the chap with the marker is, the interesting about Tumas Ohel, see, I will say, even if you're not standing on a grave, but if you're leaning over a grave, that's also, right, Tumah is Ola Bakas, Tumah goes up. You can become Tameh. See, what the Gemara says is, when you make a marker, extend it off the grave a little bit, right? We don't put it directly over, we extend it out a little bit. That way a person will have warning before he gets on top of the Tumah, right? Rabbi Silber, listen to this. But you can't extend the marker too much, right? Because we'll say if you extend the marker too much, then what happens? See, Rabbi said, wherever the marker is obviously an area where you're not going to be planting, right? So we'll say, I just want to point something out. We're used to thinking about graves as being where? In a cemetery. Obviously, I will say this whole discussion is about graves that are not in cemeteries. So, right, so you would go out and you'd have a grave somewhere, but you'd want to plant in the surrounding area. So the Gemara is very interesting. On one hand, you have to make the marker a little bit bigger than the grave itself, but you don't want to make it too big, because then what ends up happening? You end up losing out on farming land. And I both say we don't want to go out and be mafsid the land of Eretz Yisrael. I both say, by the way, how beautiful to go out and learn this Gemara on Tu B'Shvat. Like Tu B'Shvat, when ultimately, again, the land of Eretz Yisrael once again is beginning to come back to life. The sap is going through the trees, the farming, the agricultural process, the shkedia parachat, right? The almond tree. The almond tree is blossoming. The land is getting ready to be plowed again. And I will say, what happens? The Gemara says, don't make the tziyun. Don't make the marker too big. Because if you make it too big, you'll end up losing out on vital and integral agricultural farming area. Incredible. Interesting, the Gemara said before, that a kizais min hameis, if all you have is a kizais of a corpse, there is no obligation to put a marker on top of that. Why not? Because we assume that means that ultimately, again, a kizais from the mace does not convey tumas ohel. Is that true? Vatanya, we learned, elu shemetamin ba'ohel. These are things which convey tumas ohel. Kizayis min hameis. Okay, well, so that's pretty explicit, right? A kizayis min hameis, right? The kizayis of a corpse does convey tumas ohel. If that's the case, then what? You should have to put a marker on top of it. So why are we not putting a marker on top of that? What's the case of Osai? Over we have an exact kizayis. An exact kizayis. Now Osai, now what's going to happen? What's going to happen if you have an exact kizayis of a mace? Sof. Michsar chaser. So we'll say one thing I know for sure, which is if you have an exact kizayis right now, what's going to happen? Wait a little bit. What's going to happen? You have less than a kizayis. It's going to decompose. And when you have less than a kizayis of a so we'll say that does not convey tumas ohel. Therefore, we don't want to put a tzin on top of it. So we'll say, Salah, watch, play this out. See, if you have exactly a kizayis, does it convey tumas ohel? Does it convey tumas ohel? Yes. Right. So therefore, what should you do? Really, ideally, what should you do? Put a marker on top of it. The problem is, once that marker is there, what happens? It's there. So let's play this out. Aaron HaKohen is walking with his truma. He accidentally walks on top of the marker. He assumes that what? Now what's happened? He's tameh. The truma that he's holding is tameh as well. He has to burn it. Now the truth is, if it was exactly a kizayis, chances are, give it a couple of days, it's less than a kizayis. If there's a permanent marker there, that means the olam vod, people are going to be burning truma unnecessarily. So look what the Gemara says. Mutav yisrafu alav truma v'kachim lefisha v'al yisrafu alav li'olam. Both it's such a profound Gemara. We would rather take the risk of a person accidentally coming in contact with that kizayis min hameis, right? And for a little bit of time, accidentally coming in encounter with it, becoming tummy and burning truma, than to set up a marker on top of that, in which case people will be burning truma forever, even though what? There's less than a kizayis there. Veilu and asvekas. So we'll say, what are the svekas cases? We have to stop with this. Veilu and asvekas, sichos upros. So we'll say, sichos, ilan hamesach ala aretz. Sichos means a tree canopy. Praos, avanim pruos hayotzeos min ageder. That refers ultimately again to stones that extend from a wall and serve as a canopy. Beis hapras kidistan. So what's beis hapras? We'll just read this and we'll stop. Hachorish es hakever. If one plowed a field in which there was a grave, Hare ose beis hapras. Ultimately, again, it makes a beis hapras. The kamu ose, I will say, how large is a beis hapras? Mulo ma'ana. The amount of area that it takes to plow, Mea Amma. Ultimately, again, 100 Amma. So we'll stop over here. We'll pick up at Meretz Hashem with Beis Apras tomorrow. Shkoyach.